Hi, everybody. Good morning to all of you. I hope you learned a lot. Blue, good morning. So now we're gonna move on to the next talk. And probably this is one of the most important talks of today. They all are, but the topic is a responsible approach to a sustainable era. And I think that we all should be part of the solution. And these women are gonna give us a lot of resources as to how become part of the solution and not part of the problem. So let me welcome our moderator, Samantha Tams, and the speakers are Andre Rockefeller, Vanessa Barboni-Halleck, and Carolina Kleinman. Welcome. Good luck, have fun.
Hi everyone, welcome to this session. I have the honor to be moderating 3 amazing change makers with their sustainable practices. Before we start delving into this conversation, I would like to show some videos on their projects.
We say that our mission is to model the future of fashion. That's really about creating value throughout the supply chain, all the way through to our customers' lives. And so we've really kind of taken farm to table to farm to closet and tried to give people the information to make better choices and to display that information in a way that raises the bar in the industry.
Cheers! Like they say, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. You know what else they say? Why do I feel like you've got a buzzkill up your sleeve? What happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic. I knew it. Wait, did you order a whiskey on the rocks just to make a point about ice? Ice and other things. Okay, we're heating up the planet, the ice is melting. Let's hear it. Well, the Arctic is like the planet's air conditioner, keeping our temperatures nice and comfortable. But we're messing with that AC unit, and that's causing more than just temperature problems. So like, we've broken our AC unit and now it's also leaking. Pretty literally, actually. Arctic ice reflects sunlight back into space, so we need it to keep us cool. But those big ice sheets are storing a lot of water. What do you mean by a lot? Well, if just the Greenland ice sheet melted completely, and we're talking a long time, we'd be looking at sea level rise around the world of like 23 feet. That's over 2 stories. That's like chunks of New York City underwater. New York City and many more cities along the world's coastlines. Even just 1 foot of sea level rise means those cities will see more flooding. And that ice sheet you were talking about, that's already melting? Big time. And don't forget the Arctic and its ocean currents and its polar jet stream also help shape our weather patterns. So when we warm up the Arctic, we mess with its ability to keep things stable. So we start seeing more extreme weather. So at this point, the AC unit is breaking, leaking, making strange sounds, maybe even a weird smell. Yeah, more heat waves, storms, droughts, intense rain, which can affect everything from people's health and safety to their ability to grow food all around the world. So what you're saying is what happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic. Cheers. Okay. I'm gonna need a stronger drink. Oh, could I get a vodka neat, please? Careful, you're gonna want that ice.
When I decided to get into fashion, I knew I wanted to do it from a meaningful point of view. I wanted to do something social and culturally important. Then I went to Bolivia seeking for my roots, and that's where I launched my first ethical and artisanal collection. I select a group, I work with them, I stay with them, and I make sure that whatever ideas I get from those communities, I make them in those communities. I think when you are able to live some time with the artisans, to develop your collection and your pieces with them is where you are supporting them and you're acknowledging that they are the true masters of the work. When you work with them, you give them credits, you show how they do it, you bring your new ideas into their crafts, and you create something new with them. And then you can put your label, still pay them fair trade, and it's a collaboration.
They're great videos. And each one of them has a different point of view, of course. I really want to thank them because we're going to learn so much from them. Vanessa Barboni-Halleck, Indra Rockefeller, and Carolina Kleinman. Thank you so much for joining us. We will start with you, Indra. You come from a fashion background, but most recently, as we saw in your video, you have become a climate communicator, and you have managed to use your social media as a platform to educate in a very friendly way, as we just saw it right now, about climate change. Why did you decide to communicate like that in this way?
So thank you. I'm also not used to seeing it in that size, so that's a little shock to the system. It began when I was at Columbia Climate School. So I was part of the inaugural class of Columbia University's climate school, and I graduated this past spring. And while I was there, it occurred to me that one of the most powerful tools we have in communication in our modern age is social media. And in the curriculum, we were talking about communication, but often through traditional media, writing op-eds, things like that, but writing essays. So I wanted to explore this idea of how do we communicate using channels that have the opportunity to amplify messages. And I approached a professor and I asked if I can work on an independent study to address this idea. So we sort of set up a system where I had a thesis and I would create a video. We decided to start on TikTok because I had no idea about how TikTok worked, and I had my Instagram, and I sort of was like, this is a neutral place to begin. And I started creating this video series as sort of a philosophical exercise of how can we break down these complicated topics. Climate science and the climate space in general is a very layered, complicated, and difficult topic. I mean, it took me 2 years of my master's to really sort of even for myself understand some of these concepts, but they're so fundamental to everybody and they touch everybody. There's nobody who really isn't affected. Of course, there are some certain communities that are on the front line that are experiencing this in very deep ways, and some people are experiencing in more distant ways, but it is a topic that is absolutely touching everybody. And so I thought, how can we break this down so that people can understand in a way that isn't feeling like preaching or lecturing, but really conversational. And that's where this idea came of conversations. And I had myself, so I was like, okay, there's gonna be 2 of me. And this idea of injecting a bit of humor, a bit of entertainment, a little bit of fashion, of sort of just interest, because we all know that as we touch sort of a social media stream, you give something a quarter of a second before you decide to keep going. And so how can you capture that attention for just a second longer on a topic that is important and break it down in a way that people feel like they can come away with a better understanding, even if it's just a beginning point. And so the first video I posted was the question of what is 1.5 degree warming? And that is something that I had thought a lot about, as I often saw in the media portrayed. 1.5 degree warming is a threshold that we don't want to exceed. This is something that you see a lot in the IPCC reports, and you see in sort of these international accords, and it's an international goal. But what does it mean? I mean, it warmed more than 1.5 degrees since this morning. Is it Celsius? Is it Fahrenheit? What's this deep meaning around it? And so that was this first topic that I wanted to handle. And so I made this video, and I was eating ice cream with myself as 2 characters. And when I posted it, I wasn't expecting much. The whole goal with the professor was I take notes and we read the data and just sort of analyze, and sort of the assumption was it'll be 10 here or 20 there, and then I'll try to make something out of it. And it started going viral. And I think partly because people didn't like the way I ate my ice cream. people really had a problem with it. I was trying not to lick, so I was sort of biting it, and that really, really offended some people, but I guess that really helped that initial algorithm, because it was viewed initially by over 1 million people. And amongst all the criticisms of the way I eat my ice cream, there was a lot of people saying, this is so helpful, I've never understood this topic this way, or this really just changed the way I think about this one little issue. So I started making more, and it took a while for me to have the guts to bring it onto Instagram, where I had a different sort of content platform. And now it sort of is something that I love working on. It's just sort of a passion to be able to figure out how I can take these complex topics and break them down in a simple way. So
Absolutely. Simple, easy to digest, Caro, I want to ask you something.
Hi. Is this working? Hola.
It is.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here.
Now, we started with climate, we started with education and educating the audience about climate change. You have done so, but with artisanal work, and that is also a pressing issue that we need to discuss today in terms of sustainability. We at Labs have traveled through many cities in Latin America. Every time that we meet a lot of the brands that work with artisanal groups, sadly, they tell us that, a lot of their artisans haven't been able to pass along the craftsmanship and skills to the younger generations. And I know that you work with a lot of artisans, and you have also worked to pass along this cultural craftsmanship and cultural heritage. How do you do that?
Well, first of all, I started my brand 20 years ago. And in those days, the word sustainability didn't even exist. It wasn't a concept. I didn't do it because I wanted to be sustainable. I wanted to do it because I grew up in fashion. And I actually am a musician by heart. So I was between that, doing fashion or music. And I decided that if I was going to launch a brand, it has to be meaningful. It has to be done with a purpose. And so by chance, I traveled to the north of Argentina, where I'm from, and I fell in love with all the artisanal works and the textiles and the people. And they weren't super organized, but I managed to do a small collection there. And from there, I traveled to Peru to try to do my first artisanal collection. And it actually took me to live in Peru for 6 months. So working with artisans is not something that you can just pop into a town or a community and just take 2-3 days and make product happen. You need to understand where these crafts come from, the ancestry that they carry through generations, and you have to be very respectful that this is a millenary technique and honor them and make them in the place where they were born on the first place. So for me, this has been a journey of living in Peru with my husband, with the kids, creating communities from zero that didn't even exist. In Oaxaca, we have an entire group of artisans 2 hours away from the city in San Juan del Rio that we've been working with for the last 15 years. And we give them work all year round. So we make sure that when we set up a collection, we do it mindfully with all the people that we have met along the way, and that we have a responsibility of giving work to. Of course, in those communities, the younger generations don't want to dress in their attires, but sometimes they do want to carry on their crafts. So I think it is possible. You just have to be there and take enough time to really honor their work and understand, because it's also something that it takes time to be made. You don't produce it like in factories around the world that they do things like they make a dress in an hour. This is something that it takes 30 days, 15 days, and we are very mindful of telling the whole story of where we make the pieces. On our hand tags, we communicate who made the piece, how it was made, how many days it took. So these are pieces of art, and I have a collection of my archives from the first, you saw there, all these women march. That was actually my first collection that I did, and I still have each one of those products, and they last. They last, forever. So I think it's important to empower these artisans and co-create with them give them also new materials to work with them, because sometimes what happens to the younger generations is they're a little bored of seeing the same thing over and over. So you have to bring innovation to those communities. I'm gonna actually remove my glasses. And you have to be creative with them and support them in every way we can. So we have that commitment in a brand, and we actually produce in many places in Latin America. In Peru, we do knits and the shoes. In Uruguay, we also work with knits from a factory that I grew up going into those stores. You know, when I was little, that shop already exists, and it's family-owned businesses that kept organizing themselves as they grew. So it's a matter of like working and growing together and committing to supporting them all year round. I think that helps a lot. And then also we do rugs in Guatemala. We do our homewares in Colombia, hand-painted. I think preserving this heritage is super important because, as you're saying, it is kind of getting extinct. So that's kind of like the core mission of our brand.
Respecting the traditions as well, and really working with a newer generation and passing along.
Yes,
Fantastic.
definitely.
Vanessa, my next question is for you. You're such a pioneer. You have one of the most beautiful and successful sustainable brands, but you didn't have a fashion background. You were in finance when you noticed that the system was broken in the fashion industry. What inspired you to create another tomorrow?
You know, I think that for all of us as entrepreneurs, you end up bringing your whole life experience to your work. You kind of have to have that sense of, I think, initiative. So the very long story short was that I grew up actually in the Midwest. My dad was actually Colombian, but very American. He was a professor and an early technologist, and my mother was an artist. And so my whole life I grew up really with this idea that we can solve problems at the intersections of discipline. But there wasn't a business bone in any of my family members growing up. But I landed on Wall Street. I spent my career in finance at Morgan Stanley. I spent 15 years there, working mostly in emerging markets. But my whole finance career, I was constantly trying to figure out how was I going to bring my skill set to bear to work on problems that I thought were really future relevant. And frankly, I had no idea about fashion. I knew, I think, one person in all of fashion, which was my college ex-boyfriend's sister, with whom I'm actually still very close. But she had just had her third child, and she was completely useless by her own estimation. But long story short, after 15 years at Morgan Stanley, I said, okay, I either believe what I say I believe in, or I should just be really happy with this job and keep my mouth shut. And it was a good job, and it's a great company. So, but I felt passionate. So I ended up taking a sabbatical, ostensibly actually to stay within finance and just shift my career in the direction of sustainable finance and directing capital at future relevant solutions. And this gave me this really amazing opportunity to really zoom out and be curious, really, really curious for the first time. And I was going through all these different industries and how they were messing up the planet, and most of it was pretty familiar to me until I got to fashion. And I was just totally blown away by the magnitude of the problem, by the complexity of the problem, and really by how risky this business is and how the broken nature of the economic model drives us to this lowest cost that hurts people, that hurts the planet, that hurts animals. And I said, there has to be a different system, not just about sourcing, but a different system. And so the more I looked at this and the more I looked at what was in the market, I didn't see many examples of what that vision could potentially look like. And so another tomorrow really exists, and we say this as kind of our internal mission statement, is and knowing that we're imperfect, to model the future of fashion as we think it could be possible. And really taking a business lens to circularity, technology, sourcing, transparency, and even the really unsexy things that other industries have figured out, like just-in-time manufacturing. So it was a big leap of faith, but after 6 months of sabbatical and a lot of research to understand how we could also meet the customer where they were, I decided to take the plunge, and I've never looked back.
That's an amazing story. You really inspire us all to look into the three of you, into different approaches on how we can make this planet a better place. And I really want to address, what are the pressing issues, Indra? What do you think that we need to be speaking about right now?
I mean, obviously, we're here because we believe climate and sustainability and sustainability being a tool in sort of the climate issue in terms of, as we sit here as designers, as entrepreneurs, as consumers and retailers, whatever our role may be here. But we really all have to find, I think, our space that we can carve into the climate movement, so to speak. And I really am a firm believer that anyone who wants to take action in climate can do so without needing to make drastic changes. You know, yes, I went to graduate school because I felt a burning need to somehow address this on a educational level, but that's completely unnecessary. You don't have to be all you have to do is be an expert in the space that you believe in and find the intersection between that and your priorities in climate and sustainability work. And I think it's really just about taking what you know, what community you've built, whether that's as a brand or as an individual, and connecting the dots to what you can do to amplify the intersection of where you are and the work that's being done in climate. So I don't think it takes any level of larger expertise, but rather passion and sort of a willingness to stand up and use the tools in your own toolkit to do so.
And we're going to speak about the toolkit in a minute. And that takes me to you, Caro. Obviously, you implement your sustainable practices in Carolina K with your programs, which is the Cultural Appropriation and Zero Waste Project. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So, yeah, in the brand, we have the artisanal part of the brand, but we have a big part of the brand that is also doing prints with artists. We do artist collaborations, so like each one of those pieces become works of art. And then we do kind of like the solid, like the suit that I'm wearing that is made of hemp and with hand embroidery. So I think we have to be very mindful of what we make, and we have to, from beginning to end, like I have, and my team is there, I have like weekly conversations with the team about addressing every issue in our entire supply chain, from sourcing to supporting smaller family businesses to using recyclable materials or compostable bags, eco-friendly certificate fabrics. It's something that is super important. And also minimizing, I mean, we have a business and we have to sustain our families and our businesses. Before I moved to the US 7 years ago, that we were living off the grid in Mexico and Peru, I used to make 2 collections a year. And as I created a team here established in the US, I had to go into making 4 collections. So because we all said in the pandemic that we were gonna stop and they were gonna be seasonless, but at the end we are in this system that we still need to bring product. So what we try to do is like minimize the product that we make. We always do pre-order, so we only produce what is already sold, and then we have an e-com business model that is to make long-lasting pieces that basically we're really working hard in this project called Past, Present, Future, and it's going to be very mindful about what we do and bring in even pieces we created through these 20 years of the brand that are the core of the brand and that we can carry all year round without needing to go on sale. Because I think fast fashion is the main issue here that, I mean, I have to bring it up in this conversation about sustainability. And I think if you guys, and I always tell my team, like, guys, look at the documentary, The True Cost. Like, that shows you exactly what is the true cost of the lives of the people that are behind these cheap, fast-made products that people are consuming like crazy because they just want instant gratification. So I think we have to make a bigger impact and also do our research and know that we can stand in the light and we can empower all these other designers and upcoming brands to kind of go into our direction. And that is by sharing also the way we do it and even giving the resources that we do, because there's bigger brands I don't need to name them, but that they develop, I don't know, mushroom leather or certain things like that, and they don't share it with the people. They
We
just
were
use it
speaking
for
back then that there's an upcoming textile show, right?
Well, there's an upcoming textile show that it's called The Future of Fabrics. And in that show, you have hundreds, if not thousands, of new technology, whether it's like vegan leather, or you want to do cotton, even recycled zippers, or sourcing your buttons. So we are going. It's going to be actually soon. That's going to be in November 14 and 15, and it's in New York. But also for the people that cannot travel there, there's a virtual show, and you can get all of those resources. So I encourage everyone to look into that, because that's like all this new technology that sometimes people don't even know where to start and how to approach.
Vanessa, how do you approach technology in Another Tomorrow, and how can you advise all the entrepreneurs that are here into implementing that into their brands?
Yeah, so one of the first things I really noticed about the industry was actually how little technology is actually interspersed into the business model of brands. And so one of the first decisions that we made, which I think has proven to be one of the best, was that we made everything born digital. So every single item that we've ever made has its own unique digital ID. And what we didn't imagine was how flexible this architecture could be for innovation. So the very first use case was kind of what you saw at the beginning, which was taking farm to table to farm to closet and giving people the ability to see with full transparency how each piece was made. But it also turned out to be an incredible architecture for our authenticated resale program. So we basically created like the BMW certified pre-owned model for fashion, totally in-house, and we use those digital IDs to authenticate the product and pass it on from one customer to the next. I would very strongly recommend resale for everyone. I think if you look at one of the biggest and most important trends over the last 3 to 5 years is really the cultural shift for the consumer around re-commerce. It's now totally destigmatized, and I think it's really amazing to see for this next generation of customers, which are so important to every single brand out there, that many of them, irrespective of income level, will prefer to buy secondhand first if they can find it. And so it's an imperative for brands to meet that secondhand customer where they are and bring them into your universe. And it's an amazing way to augment your revenue stream without just constantly churning out more and more and more. So we've got great relationships with most of the partners in this space. So if anybody wants to reach out to me in terms of potential partner options, I'm more than happy to share the whole gamut of them. I deeply believe that having digital IDs is the best way to do it, but it's not a precondition. So I would say just get started. And then if you want to add digital IDs later, you can. And equally, we've got a bunch of good relationships there, so happy to share.
That's wonderful. The mentorship that you guys can give to all of the entrepreneurs here is super valuable. So please take advantage while Vanessa is here to ask her any questions about technology and resale. My next questions are really open to anyone, the three of you, because we need to understand, and a lot of the entrepreneurs out here in the audience would just want to know. We talk about creating sustainable businesses, but they're usually pretty costly, and I really want to address this, because how can we be more responsible in creating products or projects, but at the same time be profitable? Because at the end of the day, it is a business. Who would want to respond to that? Vanessa?
I'll take it quickly. Look, the world is not your oyster when it comes to sustainability. I think that that's just like a natural part of the equation. For us, we've tackled it in a few different ways, but ultimately I think it's actually added to the resiliency of our business model. One is we've created a library of custom fabrics, and then we design into them. And actually when you do that, you can get economies of scale because you're able to actually order those in bulk, oftentimes undyed, et cetera, and you can create the best possible fabrics with all of your sustainability and quality and kind of hand-feel parameters in mind. So that's one. The other is actually sustainability can actually really reduce the risk in your business. And so I think Carolina already talked about the made-to-order model. I think that's amazing, especially for more special pieces. And then, for more, let's say, core collections, moving into this really demand-responsive, like just-in-time model, I think is actually really risk-reducing
and it's sustainable. And then the third is, of course, resale. When we are creating fabrics and when we are producing, there's no question that the cost base is higher, sometimes meaningfully so. But if you can design your business model or even new product lines with that in mind and your margin structure with that in mind at the outset, then you can create a really resilient model. So it takes some creativity.
And I'll just add to that with my Paravel hat on as sort of a sustainable designer as well, is this idea. I think there's a lot of times this intimidation factor around limitations, right? Like as Vanessa said, starting with a certain set of materials, but sometimes those limitations can be very freeing creatively. So when you create a framework, when you create a value system for your brand, and you look at every decision through the lens of those possibilities, it's actually freeing and liberating and creativity inducing, because you have a clear sense of where to go. And I think as an entrepreneur, you get thrown in so many directions, and the easiest risk, I think, to a young business is to be thrown off course, and that can be for a variety of reasons. But when you know your value system and you know the lens through which you make your decisions, I actually think it's empowering and liberating.
And actually, I think you have to be like, at least in my business, I am very hands-on. Like I go to factory visits, I sit with the artisans, I know exactly in the whole supply chain what's going on. One time I traveled to India because I love India, because I do meditation, yoga, and I decided to work with family-owned businesses there for the printed part of the collection. And I asked them always to save all the fabric scraps. So from those fabric, you were asking me about the zero waste, and it came organically when I saw all those pieces of fabrics left over in bags, and I was like, what are we doing with all of this? So we repurposed it into one of a kind. We also did like mattresses for the homeless with like recyclable cotton, or sometimes the fabrics come default. They have faults, not default faults. So you need to be creative in seeing your entire operation and be mindful on every aspect of the way. Even if you get a big order from a retailer and you think it's too much and you might get returns and you might need to go on discount, what we do is we reduce the order to half. And I'd rather sell less but better and mindfully, because I feel like we are here to last. And so we have to make all these decisions in order to make this profitable for everyone.
And this is a very interesting point, because obviously you were talking as your product, grows and your brand grows, you create more demand, and probably you are creating more collections, and it becomes this rat race of really, creating more than 4 collections a year, which is not sustainable at all. But how do you scale, a business?
I've been scaling also in categories. Like we have we used to be very at the beginning, we were known for our knits, and then as I moved here to Miami, we started into swim, and then we do the homewares because it's part of the lifestyle of the brand. So you can also scale in different directions, and instead of making a lot of something, you can make little of many things, and then you help more communities of artisans or more factories, because at the end of the day, we are all interconnected and we're helping each other. It's like the whole system has to work, So I think that's a good way of scaling.
How have you scaled Another Tomorrow?
It's really been about, I would say, our core collection, and again, leveraging these fabrics that we can then platform and design into, and really understand which pieces add the most value to our customers. So we've really leaned in on that, and we've made that even more curated. And then we have it both D2C, and then we offer it to our wholesale partners. And I think having that balanced channel strategy is really, really important, because if you're only doing D2C, and I kind of think that the barbell, if you look at both extremes, it's kind of broken. Pure D2C is really expensive and it's a lot of risk. Pure wholesale, and you don't really know who your customer is. So it's really finding that balance of both, meeting your customer where they are, and creating scalability in those areas where you're consistently delivering for her. And then I think it's an organic scarcity model for the things that are new, because inherently they have risk, but they also have desirability. So I think it's in many respects not dissimilar from what Carolina is describing. I think it just differs a little bit by brand.
We were, in your preparation for this interview, we were talking about toolkits, and you mentioned it earlier right now. And I think that it's really interesting to understand for the audience if they can open their toolbox. What are these toolkits that they could really, go in and take away from this session?
Yeah, I mean, I think that everyone in this room has a toolkit, no matter what your role is, and that toolkit can be applied to sort of your values and priorities. Like in this instance, we're talking about sustainability and climate. And I think that it's really important to think of, if you're an entrepreneur, for example, to think of your entire supply chain as a toolkit. It's not just, oh, I made a sustainable product over here and I'm going to check that box. It's really thinking about every touch point where you interact with a community, with a supplier, with a partner, with a shipping provider, with your customer. How are you shipping it? How are you supporting your local communities? How are you making sure that your supplier has ensured certain working conditions that are up to your standards? How do you make sure that every material is looked through the lens of maximizing sustainability or minimizing your footprint? So you have these opportunities. And then you also have the communities that you've built, and that can be in any capacity. And the stories that we tell our communities, whether as brands or as individuals, whether it's around a dinner table or on social media, I think really have a lot of power and influence. And I think we have to be aware of what stories we're telling. And you think of that as part of our toolkit. So really, it's just anywhere that you are interacting with the world or the natural environment, with other people, with other communities, that we have the opportunity to dig into that toolbox and really think how we're maximizing the impact of that tool.
Do you want to add anything before we wrap up?
No, I just want to thank everyone here, and I think it's important that we start to be more mindful of what we buy, of how we make things, and we make decisions every day. Like we make decisions in our personal life. I think we have to make very important decisions in our business, like you said, like minimizing the shipping, minimizing the amount of things that you bring into this world, because it's our responsibility. We do have businesses, but we also have to be mindful of our planet that we're all living in. It's our home, and what we're leaving to our kids. So I would, for me, that's the key to all, like being very mindful and doing things with purpose and from your heart.
Yeah.
And just take the first step. I think that's a big one. It's really easy to think that you have to have the whole thing figured out or some radically new business model, but I would say take the first step and share with each other, share the challenges and also the solutions, because the momentum builds on itself.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for this inspiring conversation.
Thank you, guys.